Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started here in a second with the day 2 session of our Idea Showcase presenters. PSA, for anyone who wasn't or was in Anthony Galdon's breakout session on AI, the practical workshop one, Kathy has printouts of the exercise that we did, and she is going to put them on the table outside. So if you want to take these home, play with the prompts yourself, you're more than welcome. But okay, with that, we're going to get started introducing our presenters. Today we have Cindy Wilner from the Connecticut Data Collaborative in Hartford, and she'll be talking more about their work promoting equitable pandemic recovery for Hartford's young children. We also have Callie Bauer from the Johnson Center at Grand Valley State University, talking about data dashboards and how to make them more engaging for your communities. We also have Rebecca Shearer at the University of Miami, talking about the IDEAS Consortium early childhood model. And finally, we'll have Ashley Williams-Clark from Detroit Future City, talking about the research they did with Data Driven Detroit on inherited properties. And with that, I will turn it over to Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy Wilner. I'm Director of Research at CT Data Collaborative, and I'm going to tell you about a project that we conducted to help the City of Hartford understand the impacts of the pandemic on their early care and education system and young children in the city. And we're very honored to receive the Kingsley Impact Award for this work. Do I need to press this button to start it? Okay. First, let me tell you a little bit about CT Data. We're a small nonprofit with a mission to connect people and data to promote informed decision-making and to advance equity in Connecticut. To enact this mission, we provide a variety of data services, including providing data tools and data consulting, running a data helpline, conducting research and analysis, running an integrated data system called the Hartford Data Collaborative, running data literacy workshops for individuals and organizations, and conducting data strategic planning for organizations. I joined CT Data in January of 2022. At the time, the world was still reeling from the unprecedented disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic, including major impacts on the early care and education system, which exacerbated a pre-existing childcare affordability and staffing crisis. During the pandemic, administrators of Hartford's Division of Early Learning were looking for data to inform their work supporting the city's childcare providers and families with young children. Although the city's state-funded childcare centers were entering data into a central data system, the city had limited capacity to analyze these data to inform their work. They also lacked systematic data on the challenges faced by childcare providers, families, and children. To inform the City of Hartford's work, we analyzed their administrative data and childcare enrollment trends. We surveyed childcare providers across the City of Hartford, and we conducted focus groups with parents. And this work was supported by funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We found that child care center enrollments dropped by 43% from 2019 to 2020 across the city. And as of 2022, enrollments were still 30% lower than pre-pandemic levels. What was especially concerning was that the pandemic-related drop in enrollments was concentrated among Hartford's children in poverty. On our survey, child care providers reported that a lack of demand from parents was the top reason for child care slot vacancies. And in our focus groups with parents, we learned that many parents don't know how to find affordable child care in their community. In response to these findings, the City of Hartford conducted targeted outreach to boost child care enrollments, particularly among low-income families in the city. including a campaign to raise awareness about the availability and benefits of affordable childcare programs in Hartford. On our survey, childcare center administrators also expressed concern about children's development, particularly their language development and high rates of emotional and behavioral problems. In response, the City of Hartford developed new programs to support children's language development, social emotional growth, and mental health. Also on our survey, 86% of childcare center administrators said that it is hard to hire and retain qualified staff, and more than half said that they were considering leaving the childcare industry entirely. 92% of childcare center administrators said that the fees they charge parents don't cover their expenses, and 68% of family childcare providers said that government subsidies and funding don't cover their expenses. In response, the City of Hartford created staff training initiatives to improve recruitment, training, and retention of qualified childcare professionals. And they provided financial support for childcare providers who were struggling to keep their programs running. You can scan the QR code here to read the full report on our website and view a webinar where the director of Hartford's Division of Early Learning talks about how they've used our findings to inform their work. And thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Callie Bauer. I am the Director of Strategy and Planning at the Dorothy A. Johnson Center for Philanthropy. The Johnson Center has been building community dashboards for our nonprofit and foundation clients for several years. And when I refer to community dashboards, what I'm talking about here are dashboards that are intended for a local audience and that contain a combination of publicly available data sets, such as the ACS, and locally sourced data from community partners, including ISDs, nonprofits, community partners, and municipalities. I'm sharing with you today the 3 lessons that the Johnson Center has learned to engage with community. The first lesson, unsurprisingly, is around trust. It is absolutely essential to build trust and develop strong relationships with local data providers. This will ensure easier collaboration and long-term success in the work. One of the strategies that the Johnson Center uses to build trust is to schedule data kickoff meetings with local data partners. We talk about the goals of the dashboard. We typically involve the nonprofit or foundation funding the dashboard in these discussions. And we talk about the Johnson Center's role in data processing, data acquisition, and data visualization. Throughout the entire life cycle of the dashboard, we are also continuously engaging data partners and sharing data sharing best practices, talking about data confidentiality and data privacy. We're talking about the pros and cons of disaggregating data, and we are keeping their capacity top of mind. Center to our work with partners is keeping their needs and concerns top of mind. Once trust has been established with our partners, we can shift gears and start thinking about how data should be displayed on dashboards. And the second lesson that we've learned is more data is not always better. We typically work with nonprofits and foundations who are tech and data savvy and want to share that with their communities. However, one of the considerations that we need to keep top of mind is how easy or difficult is it for a local data partner to pull together a data set for a dashboard. And in some of our experience, the process to pull together data becomes very burdensome for the local data partner, and it warrants discussions about does the burden of pulling together a data set offset the benefit of displaying it on the dashboard. In addition, we need to keep the intended audience of the dashboard top of mind. We have had clients who've wanted to add 40 different indicators with data cut 20 different ways, which is wonderful, but that doesn't always resonate well with communities. It doesn't necessarily showcase impact very well. So it's managing kind of the pros and cons of doing so. After we've established trust, after we've had discussions about how best to display data on the dashboard, then it becomes much easier to rally all the folks involved around how best to supplement dashboards with stories of impact. And this is a relatively new lesson that we've learned at the Johnson Center, primarily through our work on the Grand Rapids neighborhood, Promise Neighborhood dashboard. The dashboard started off with many charts and graphs, and we started engaging our nonprofit partners to co-author stories of impact that could be shared on the dashboard. Our nonprofits started writing about how the grant positively impacted the communities that we served, and the Johnson Center also provided insight onto the stories so that we could supplement them with graphs and charts from the dashboard. That made the dashboard content more easily digestible and accessible to the community. It helped promote long-term sustainability of the work in the dashboard, and it also allows some of our partners to more easily share this information on social media. So this is work that we are just stepping into, but we believe has a lot of traction. And these are the 3 lessons I wanted to share with you all today. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I'm afraid to press the screen button. My name is Rebecca Shearer. I am a professor at the University of Miami. Am I pressing the right button? The green button? There we go. That's not the right button. Sorry. Okay, we're missing the beginning on the side. Okay. I'm Rebecca Shearer. I'm a professor at the University of Miami and the research director for the Ideas Consortium for Children. I'm really excited to be here. We're a new associate member, and just learning so much from all the different sites today about the work that you're doing, and excited to share like a really small tidbit of some of the work that we've been doing to try to take the data from our integrated data system, our early childhood integrated data system, and share it out for impact in collaboration with our communities. And thank you, Jordan from Ohio, for the really cool t-shirt. Okay, this isn't going, so let's try this. Okay, so who are we? The Miami Ideas Consortium for Children is a collaboration between the university and all of the major early childhood, early care and education providers in the county. We're governed by a formal data sharing collaboration agreement, and we really were organized about 10 years ago to begin solving the technical challenges of understanding who is being served collectively across early childhood siloed systems. Our challenge, like many of you working in complex urban environments, is that our county is rather large with 2.7 million people, quite diverse in the residents that are living here. And we know that risks and resources in communities do not always go hand in hand, and they're unequitable at distribution across the county and access to resources that support children's kindergarten school readiness. At the same time, some of the work that we've done has found that over 80% of children are enrolled in some kind of formal early care and education program before kindergarten. So that's what really we've been focusing a lot on in our partnership work. We were really fortunate to receive a 5-year research grant from the Children's Trust to take some of our integrated data and to work on developing some indicators and early childhood measures that could monitor the strengths of and assets in communities and resources, as well as monitor children's development over time. To do that, we created a learning community that engaged 3 community-based organizations and their leaders across 3 distinct areas of the county, representing Little Haiti, Little Havana, and Overtown. And we met with the leadership to try to map and define their community areas and catchment areas, because some of those are different than what we had, where we wanted to start, where they wanted us to start. And we also met with them to identify amongst this huge matrix lots of different indicators that were important to them. We co-created different kinds of reports and maps to share back with them that included kindergarten readiness assessments, as well as other assets like available and high quality early care and education programs. And we took all of this information and invited them to come to a data walk where we also invited some of the larger agency administrators and policymakers to share information, talk about data about children. And it was really neat. A lot of different recommendations came out of that meeting. One of which was we need to talk up to policymakers, and we also need to message out to parents. So I'm going to share with you one. We met with a mayor. It's coming up. There we go. We brought the recommendations to the mayor, which was really cool, with the St. Law Neighborhood Community Center folks. And they shared that we needed more slots to reach families in that community, and we were able to secure more funding, or they were able to secure more funding to reach more families. And then also we wanted to figure out how to get the word out to families and to outreach to families in the Northeast Corridor and Little Haiti. And so we developed this app. I'm going to share with you really quickly what it looks like in the few seconds I have left. This is the prototype. We call it the Parent App for short, or Map to Early Learning. So parents can go ahead and access this. It's available in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole using some of the data that we have. You're first welcomed by a short video introducing parents to welcome them into the app. Then there's a menu of different kinds of early childhood programs that families can access. They navigate to the first tab, they click on My Needs, they enter their zip code to come up with services in their neighborhood. They enter the ages of the children that they're looking for, the times that they need services, because many families need services outside of traditional hours. If you need special help, you click on the little video icon. Lots of different voices and videos come up to tell you more about those services, which is really nice, and it helps address some of the tech literacy issues that we have in certain communities in our area. And then you get a map that you can share with folks at the Neighborhood Community Center that can help you kind of reach out and find next steps in getting services for your children, which is really cool. Thank you all, and thank you to our huge team and all the work that we do. And I look forward to talking to you more about how all of you are working in your communities to get the data and the knowledge out to families. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Williams-Clark with Detroit Future City, and I'm here to talk to you about a project we did called Keeping Your Family Home, addressing the challenges of inherited properties in Detroit. And I always like to say, think about, if you own your home, what that means. Because our funder, the Gilbert Family Foundation, was finding in Detroit that households were coming for critical tax foreclosure resources, only to either discover or disclose that they weren't technically the legal owners of the homes that they were in. And so those families weren't able to qualify for critical resources. So we partnered with our local NNIP partner, Data Driven Detroit, to be able to quantify the extent to which we had those heirs property in our community to be able to target resources to address it. And so we worked over the course of a year. On my slide, that's not progressing, but we looked at pulling together data sources to do that. One of the things we ran into is, what is an heir's property? And I think it's important grounding because it shows up different in the South versus other places. But it's basically family-owned property that's inherited without a will. And that can happen if there's not a will in place, or if there's a will and it doesn't go through probate. And I should say I'm not a lawyer, so there's nuances to that. But at the core of it, it's a property that is passed on through generations without legal proceedings to formally transfer it to the next owner. And what that can result in is really complicated tangled title situations when something called intestate succession kicks in, where what you might end up with is multiple family owners that can stake a claim to that house, and that might not necessarily align with who is actually living in the home. And as a result of that, it can have ripple effects from a variety of ways. In some places in the South, this can extend to 300 plus family members. The impact of this is not just on household individual stability if you're at risk of losing your home. It also impacts your ability to leverage the wealth that could be generated from owning a home, whether that's taking out a second line of equity, leveraging it for paying for college, selling the house. It can also have impacts on the surrounding neighborhood if a house goes into disrepair, or if households can't access critical resources like those tax foreclosure resources or home repair dollars to be able to invest back into that house and to maintain their stability. So how did we identify heirs properties? D3 was able to leverage a methodology developed by Pew for work that they did in Philadelphia. We had different data contexts, but we're able to take data from the tax assessor's office, combine it with a deceased suppression service called Melissa Data, and come up with a list of likely heirs properties in our city. And so properties where everyone who was listed as owners in that assessor's file was deceased. And we surrounded this with community context. We talked to legal providers. We talked to people who were navigating heirs property challenges. We talked to people who had lost their home to heirs property to understand within the Detroit context and urban context and we had some challenges though. So one of the challenges is that we had to use our tax assessor's data, which lags a little bit with the Register of Deeds data. We couldn't look at condos because of how owners are listed in the data. There's also some restrictions around how far back we could go. But we found in total 5,525 likely heirs properties in Detroit. We know that's an undercount. The majority of those households are likely owner occupied, over 3/4. I think it's also important that there was a significant number of renters. And these properties were spread across the city. It wasn't an east or west thing. But what was interesting for our work, and we do a lot around growing Detroit's black middle class, was intersections with this squiggly map of middle class neighborhoods. In total, $268 million is estimated to be the value of these homes based off neighborhood values. So from this work and this very initial work around heirs properties, we've been able to leverage and to bring in over $1 million in investment to address heirs property in Detroit. Used to work here, in Detroit. And so looking at it from 3 different ways. So we're looking at policy reform to address at a systems level. We're also looking at how you resolve current heirs properties, and then how do you prevent future heirs properties from happening. And so we've had a beautiful coalescing of partners working on this. The Federal Home Loan Bank invested $500,000 to work with List Detroit, who also got funding from a large bank to leverage work that Lisk Jacksonville's been doing, and they've really been leaders in this heirs property space. So they're doing work piloting neighborhood interventions, working with CDOs to tie heirs property with accessing home repair dollars. We're also engaged with the city of Detroit, they were able to use ARPA funds to launch a wills and estate planning clinic, trying to get more people getting that kind of preventative wills in place. Also, the Gilbert Family Foundation invested in our local legal ecosystem to support families that were going through tax foreclosure and who are in heirs property. So through all of this work, this data, while it was imperfect, while it was a undercount, has really been able to catalyze a lot of movement to preserve people's legacy. So with that, thank you very much.
Okay, questions for any of our presenters? Do we have? Yeah.
Oh, it looked like a squiggly map. The map that not a technical term. We have, to the map people out there, we have yet to figure out a good way to like overlay these 2 maps, but we do a lot of work on growing Detroit's black middle class neighborhoods, because that's an area that we've lost a lot of folks in. And so we overlaid our map of middle class and near middle class neighborhoods with where we were seeing the greatest prevalence of heirs property. And so we were able to see in some of those neighborhoods that probably have had some of that greater wealth accumulation that's at risk of loss. And our partners at List Detroit used that kind of middle class neighborhoods map to try to figure out which 2 neighborhoods they would pilot their efforts in. Yeah, so it looks squiggly because there's just not a good way to show the 2.
I apologize, this is a very specific question about early childhood policy. In your study, did you take a look at daycare providers and like home child care providers versus like more institutional Head Start, early Head Start, public school systems? Like, I'm just really curious about, because in Tulsa, in under-resourced neighborhoods, community members actually often prefer home child care and daycare services over a more institutional, enrolling their kids into Head Start kind of a thing. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And Unfortunately, the City of Hartford's central data system at that time only had the Child Care Center enrollment data in it. Actually, since then, they've expanded and they have a robust network of family child care providers in the city, and they've started having them enter their data as well. So if I were to do that study over again now, assuming all their data is actually in there, I would absolutely include them, because I agree this story would probably look very different. Our survey of child care providers did go to all providers in the city, including both center administrators and family child care providers, and we did see some different trends in their experiences.
I do think what's tricky about that too, I know it's your study, but is that a lot of providers are not licensed, may not be licensed, and so they're not in the administrative data sets that you'd be using also.
Brian Hurd again from St. Louis. Thank you again for the heirs property report. That's a great report. I look forward to looking more into it. In St. Louis, we do a lot of development, housing development, and we always run against issues when we're acquiring property or getting site control, finding out who the real owners are of the properties. But back in May, on May 16th, we had a tornado that hit and demolished a lot of property, particularly in the African American community, where it's highly dense, low income. The tornado hit in the worst area of the St. Louis region that it could have hit. And so we're dealing with issues about who owns the properties. When the FEMA comes in, there are challenges because you have to have ownership. You have to be able to prove ownership. So all this stuff is snowballing, and it's something that we have to deal with. But I'm glad that you mentioned using ARPA funds to set up the Will Clinic, which I think is a very important thing. So I really don't have a question, but I just want to let you know that I am listening to what you shared. That's very important, because a lot of our communities, particularly communities of color, particularly the African American community, we have challenges about ownership, not using wills, not using trusts to deed that property to the next generation. So it becomes a systemic problem when it comes to reducing or not having economic mobility and passing on that generational wealth. So thank you again for your study.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, it's interesting, to your point, FEMA, for good or bad, we've been looking to, because I think it might have been coming out of what happened with Katrina, like developing alternative forms of proof of ownership. So recognizing that some of the legal interventions that are needed to address heirs property, they can take a while, right, to either rectify an heirs property or to just work through probate. And so there are some examples of like affidavits of heirship or other like alternative proof of ownership, and that's something that we are exploring in Detroit about how can you make sure that even if someone's in an heirship property situation, it's not preventing them from being able to access critical resources. And I would offer that the National Consumer Law Center has been a great resource to us as we've explored that locally to figure out what we could do to shift our local policies to support heirs in that situation. But what happened in St. Louis was really tragic and definitely brings that to light.
Can I just add to another piece to it? That
Yeah.
when FEMA came in, the city asked them to extend their time there. Not being political, but the federal government said we're not extending the time. So because of that, there was a missed opportunity where a lot of families have been impacted because they couldn't get enough time to prove ownership of those properties. So now the city has come in and having to condemn a number of those properties. So again, from generations before, they own the properties, trying to pass it down. It's a lost opportunity in many ways.
Hugely, hugely.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we can break. Thanks again to all our presenters from this showcase.